All right, so getting to know each other, let's go around and introduce ourselves and just rapid fire. What does your day-to-day look like? And how do you ground yourself in a stressful situation? Just a very easy softball right out of the gate. Let's start with you, Rebecca. We'll go to Jordan and then we'll go to Sarah.
Well, day to day, without a doubt, every single morning, my habit is mindfulness. I spend time with myself. I have a habit of prayer, journaling, reflecting on the day before and the day forward.
So you do the day before the next morning, not in the evening.
Sometimes I do a little evening, but in the morning, I really want to reflect on what did I learn? What was the impact that I made? What did others have? What was their impact on me? And what did I learn from any experience
Mhm.
and how I can make myself better moving forward into my day forward?
Yeah, that's interesting because one of the things that I know for me, I try to do it at night, but sometimes I'm really tired. And so I hear what you're saying is like it's easier sometimes to do it that next morning and reflect and then think about what you're going to do differently that next day.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And I should have asked you to share what is your full name and how do you define yourself professionally?
Well, my full name is Rebecca Woodard, and professionally, I am a learning and development, leadership development coach, facilitator, and I run leadership development programming specifically around. I have my heart set in servant leadership and
Mm,
teaching leaders how to become great servant leaders and coaches themselves.
love it. Okay. So, Jordan, let's go to you. Why don't you? I kind of did a little backward with Rebecca. So let's have you share with us what you do. How do you define yourself professionally? And then tell us what your day to day looks like and how do you ground yourself in stressful situations?
Yeah, love to. So Jordan White, I call myself a self-leadership coach. And that's pretty integrated in what my day-to-day is helping others become their most, highest selves through the coaching I do. And that brings so much joy to me. And that's a grounding experience in itself. But to make sure, I'm getting grounded for the day, one of my favorite books is by Mark Nepo. And the Book of Awakening is kind of just a series of little daily entries. So that's helpful, and I think getting me grounded for the day. And similar to Rebecca, I definitely have a mindfulness practice that helps me, just check in with myself and be intentional with what's going on for that
Mm.
day.
I heard someone say just the other day, and this is super scientific, that whatever you think about the first thing in the day, I'm sure there is science behind it, but I'm not going to describe it scientifically, is whatever you think about at the very, very beginning of the day really becomes your lens through which you see the entire day. If one of you have the research that you would like to share, please jump in. But this idea of Rebecca, you start with that prayer and that grounding and that mindfulness. And Jordan, you've got these meditations. And what was the name of the author that you're reading? Mark Nebo, did you say, or Nepo?
Yeah, Nepo, Nepo.
Okay.
Yep.
And so these meditations that you're reading that are helping you ground yourself emotionally and spiritually and psychologically for the day. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So good. All right, Sarah, let's go to you. How would you
Yes.
answer that question?
Oh, it's such a great question. Well, I define myself professionally as a consultant supporting education and nonprofit clients, doing learning and development work, facilitation, coaching, and just generally anyone who's in the growth process. I feel honored to be able to be alongside people and teams and organizations in the process of growth. As far as how I start my day, I do think it is sort of about those first moments of awakening and sort of becoming aware of the day, setting some intentions, and then the day is going. We have a busy family life, and that those few moments feel very fleeting, as then the day just takes on its own shape, and everybody is going in a lot of different directions.
Yeah. It is interesting, isn't it? How at the very beginning of the day, you're like, okay, I've got my lens. This is how I'm going to structure it. And then the day starts and some of it happens that you intended and some of it does not. So, okay.
Exactly.
All right, let's what were your first jobs? So we'll start with you, Jordan, and then we'll go to Sarah, and then we'll go to Rebecca. So what was your very first job?
Wow, that's taking me back. I remember doing the entrepreneurial thing, and going and knocking on doors, seeing if I could mow lawns or, do some snow removal in the winter time. But my first official job was as a dishwasher at Panera Bread. And that definitely taught me a few lessons about harder work and, committing to something that maybe wasn't the most fun thing, but
Mm,
um, started building some work ethic there from the beginning.
oof. So how old were you when you took that job at Panera? Were you like 16 or?
Yeah, I was 15 years old,
Mhm.
so I remember, yeah, needing to organize getting a ride to work as well.
Mm.
And then when I turned 16, I was so excited that I could get myself to and from work. But yeah, I was right around that age.
Do you remember what your parents said to you when you would come home and be like, "Oh, I'm less washing dishes. This is why am I doing this?" What did they say to you? Do you remember?
Oh man. Yeah, what I do remember, a perk of being there so late washing dishes was I got to leave with a lot of cookies and bagels and bread and all the things. So that was a little cherry on top. But yeah, recall my mom just being extremely proud of me
Mm,
for, just even committing to it and sticking with it. And that's, definitely a lesson my both of my parents have
yeah,
passed along to me as far as, if you're going to commit to something, it may not always be fun, but you get to kind of choose
yeah.
what you make out of this.
That is something to be proud of. Your 15-and-a-half-year-old going out and getting a job and doing the work. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can see why they were proud. Okay, favorite Panera product before we go to Sarah? What should we all go
Oh my
buy when we
gosh.
go to
I
Panera?
used, I used to love those little muffin tops. They would do just the top of the muffin,
Oh.
versus like the whole thing. That was like my favorite part. It had all the sugar on it and the toppings and all of it. And then just like a Panera cookie, oh my gosh. They're just so soft and delicious and fresh every day.
Ooh,
So
love
shout
it.
out to Panera.
Okay. Sarah, what about you? Your first job?
Yes. So my first job was as a babysitter. So at the age of 11, I took a Red Cross certification class. I even remember the little card they gave me, and just felt incredibly proud. And so I would babysit for the kids who lived across the street from us while their mom wrote children's books. And one of the very fun things in my life was then when I had children and also became a teacher and was regularly reading children's books, I would read her books both to my classes and to my children. And there was a character named Sarah who she said was named after me. So that's my little claim to fame. But certainly as an 11-year-old, I think,
Mm,
it just gave me that work ethic, gave me a sense of responsibility. I had, to balance a schedule and make sure that I was providing the service the family wanted. And so I think it was just a great entry, kind of into building a professional self. And so, yeah, look back very
well,
fondly on that
but
first job.
okay, Rebecca, what's the question that we all want to know of Sarah? What's the question?
The babysitting part.
What's the name of the book? Oh, the book.
The book is called First Day Jitters. And so it's
Mhm.
about the first day of school.
Mm.
And you'll be surprised to know who it is who has the jitters. So I will just tease you with that. And you'll have to read the book to find out who has the jitters.
Okay, I think I could guess, but we'll just leave that open loop so people go buy the book. There you go. All right, Rebecca, what was your first job?
Well, aside from the same, similar to Jordan and Sarah, because as a teenager, and I'm going to emphasize teen. Yes, it was teenager years. I did had babysitting. I did the bakery thing. Mind you, I had to get up at like 4 o'clock in the morning to put the donuts out. But it was 19 when I got my first job at UPS, and the reason why I say teen is because you're still a teenager. You're so young then.
Yeah.
And it was pivotal. It was March 26th, for me. That was the day. I'll never forget it. And
Hmm.
the reason why is because I hold so much gratitude for being hired at that organization, because that put me into the space of learning about who I am. And also, I was able to take advantage of the tuition reimbursement. So I went to school at night and got my bachelor's degree. So I'm forever thankful and full of
Wow.
gratitude for that experience at that teenage life, 19.
Wow. So you were not the traditional college student. You
Nope.
were working and going to school at night.
Yes.
Okay. Jordan, what question do you want to ask Rebecca about that? What inquiry do you want to make? I'm going to keep asking you all, your coaches, what question do you want to ask Rebecca?
And
I
one
mean,
thing to
I'm
note,
just,
online was not in the picture back then.
Yeah.
Not to date myself, but there was no online. So you
Yeah.
got in your car, left work, and went to school at night.
Yeah.
wow. Yeah, I guess my question is, what do you remember learning about yourself, like balancing that all?
Balance is one thing, how to
Mhm.
balance your life, work. And the big thing was I had always had this desire to, how can I put this stuff to good use in my job?
Mm.
So,
Mm.
so I'm one of those anomalies that know how to take, because we always hear in the learning and development world, these people took this course. How do we put it, make them, use it on the job? Well, I was very intentional and always wanted to do that. And so that was, learning to apply my learning. It was all about me doing it and going after it and asking for permission to do it,
Mm.
with the, people who I worked with. And I think the perseverance and resilience, because let me tell you, it was not
Mm.
easy. It wasn't just, logging in and going to school online. Not to say that isn't as hard, but it was a lot of commute time. And yes. And when you are going into the 20s, where do you want to go? You want to go out with your friends. Well, I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't go out with my friends. I went to
Yeah.
school and I had a lot of homework.
Wow. That's so interesting. And one of the things you said of this idea of, how do you apply this? You were working and then you were going to school and figuring and getting to apply what you were learning in school immediately.
Yep.
So good.
And the reverse happened to me, where I didn't do as well in the courses, where I
Mm.
couldn't figure out where to put it into
Mhm.
practice with
Mhm.
my job.
Mhm.
Okay. So there were some courses that, you have to take to
Right.
fulfill the curriculum. And I struggled with those courses. But I always reached out for help. I
Yeah.
got tutoring and mentoring, so I always made sure that I could still make the grade, because I was taking advantage of tuition reimbursement programming
Mhm.
at my job at UPS. So I had
Mhm.
to make a certain grade.
Mm. So good. All right. Jordan, let's go to you. And here's a question I want to ask each of you really quickly, which is, when did you realize that coaching was something that was a calling for you? Because I think usually when people do decide to coach, there is some element of calling involved. And so when did you first realize that this was something that you wanted to do more of, that this is important? You can go whatever direction you want. But Jordan, what comes up for you when I ask that question?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting process how it all unfolded. So similar to Rebecca, I took advantage of a tuition reimbursement opportunity through my corporate position. And while I was working on a master's in communication and leadership, that's where I discovered professional coaching
Mm.
and learned that a lot of high-level leaders, a lot of, influential people who seem to just kind of have it all to figured out, we're usually working with a mentor or a coach or had someone that they could really process with in a strategic way. So that's ultimately what piqued my interest.
Mhm.
But what I learned about coaching was that I was naturally doing it for a good amount of my life. I
Mm.
mean, like kind of the power of coaching is just having a generous listener, someone who's extremely curious and compassionate. I didn't grow up observing a whole lot of that, and I love both of my parents and I am so grateful for everything. And there was room, maybe for them to grow
Yeah.
in their listening skills. and communication and all of that. So I think I kind of backtracked and reflected after I learned what coaching really was at a deep level and understood that that was something that was ingrained in
Mhm.
a lot of what I observed, and just the power of listening and offering that space is just so powerful. And it's absolutely something that fills the cup for
Mhm.
sure.
Mhm.
And just being in that space, that coaching space with people is, I feel really grateful to be able
Yeah.
to do it.
Mm. So I'm gonna put a little twist on the question now, Jordan, hearing what you just shared. Sarah, do you remember an experience where where someone said to you, "Oh, you're really good at this coaching," or you're like where there was just a little bit of an epiphany around coaching that you can share?
I do. I started my career as an educator. So I was
Mhm.
a teacher in Denver Public Schools. And I kind of reflect on this time of both being coached and then developing as a coach. And so I had the enormous great fortune in my early career of having these incredible coaches. And when you look at the research of how long teachers tend to stay in the classroom, it's not very long because it's a really difficult job without the right kinds of support. So I had these amazing coaches in my life, and they, I think, were so supportive to me both professionally and personally. That then, when I got to the point in my career where then I was growing new teachers, I had the chance to be a coach, and I will never forget this moment with a teacher where she said to me, Your question just helped me uncover something that's just been beneath the surface."
Mm.
And
Mm.
I reflect back on that moment, and and so many moments since then. I think when you're alongside people for those journeys where you're really there to help them uncover whatever it is, the wisdom, the clarity, the feeling, the experience, the confidence, whatever it is. And it's such an honor to be in that space. And
Yeah.
I think about that moment and think about how that really, I think, helped me define where I wanted to go in my own coaching practice,
Mhm.
and how that's been a through line for me.
And what's interesting too, Sarah, to hear you talk is that it wasn't this person probably would not have described themselves as a coach, but they were coaching you, right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
you realized, oh, I want to do this for other people. And you may have described it as coaching, but may not have. And
Yeah.
so that led you down this path. All right. So Rebecca, you have the benefit of being the third person hearing that question. You can take this in any direction you want. What's coming up for you that you'd like to share?
What came up for me is that the leaders that I have come in contact who influenced me wonderfully in my life were those coaches, and that did inspire me to become a coach as well. I have been in learning and development for since my first day at UPS in March,
So since you were 19.
many moons
Yeah,
ago.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
And so what comes along with it, the interesting thing is that you actually almost can group coach in a classroom if you're facilitating, for example, because really we're not up there to really just dump all the information. What we're trying to do is facilitate the room to be able to get others to share their experiences, to almost even coach each other. So that's where I experienced all of that very early. And so what I think though, and I did have a coach, but what I really, that the biggest number one thing that comes up for me is that we see leaders and managers in our world who want to coach others, and yet they have not been coached. So
Mm,
I think some of the best coaches in the world are the ones that get coached. I mean, how many of us in this room right now have been coached?
mhm,
Yeah,
mhm.
And
for sure.
Yeah,
I continue to get coached
yeah,
in many different areas in my life, depending on what's needed.
yeah. It's interesting. Well, I have one question. So you had a coach when you were 19 at UPS. Was it formal or informal
It was my manager, and it was,
coaching you?
I would say, more formal back then.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
So yeah.
Got it. And it's interesting. Something that you just said that I think came up for me is this idea of if we will allow this to happen and be open to it, we can be, each one of us can be coached all the time. by lots of different people if we're open to it.
And even perhaps ourselves, if you are spending that mindfulness moments with
In the
yourself.
morning. Yeah. In the morning.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
So
I
you
love it.
begin
It all
coaching
starts at the
yourself.
beginning of the day. All right. So really rapid fire. And let's go to you first, Sarah, and then we'll do Rebecca and then Jordan. When did you first hear about disruption advisors and or the S curve as a framework? Do you remember?
I do remember because Amy
Okay.
Humble was my coach. And this is where I think it's where
Ah,
great coaches inspire other coaches. And that's
uh-huh.
really been the story for me in coaching is
Yeah.
being surrounded by great coaches and Amy bringing your work to me as a coach. I still remember she drew the S curve on a napkin. We were in a coffee shop and she drew the S curve. So very much remember that moment and the connection I felt to the concept, and it led me to reading your books. And so it just that moment, that connection with Amy was my launch.
Yeah. Yeah. And just a reminder for all of our listeners, I'm looking up. So some of you have met her before, but it might have been a while. So Amy Humble is my co-founder at Disruption Advisors. So very fun, Sarah, for you to share that. Okay, let's do you, Rebecca. Do you remember?
Well, I work with, I'm going to just plug an organization and a person,
Do.
is the University of Colorado Boulder.
Yeah.
And Walter Morgan, who he helps us, the Center for Leadership.
Mm-hmm.
They have a leadership and coaching program for the students there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I coach students there, and he introduced me to Disruption Advisors, Smart Growth, and said that we can offer the certification. And so I took that offer up, and here I am.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
What about you, Jordan?
Yeah, Rebecca and I are actually in the same boat. I work with a couple of the students up at CU as well, and have been in that program for a while now. And I got to tell you, rewarding work to be working with younger people, and it's just so special to be able to be a part of that. And yeah, prior to Smart Growth and the tool, I had read Disrupt Yourself, I think closer to when it came out, after I had come across, the podcast. And I think either I heard you as a guest on a podcast or someone sent me yours or whatnot. So it was just so interesting, kind of, divine moment when it came back around. It's like, yeah, I'm really familiar with this. Actually, I'd love to learn more. And the fact that Walt has that, connection up at CU and how it all came together is just it's beautiful what happens when there's people focused on helping others grow. So it's a great experience.
So good. And you're causing me to think it's interesting working with people in college and in their 20s. It is, I find myself, there's so much negativity about the world and, what's going to happen in the world. And yet I think you probably have all had this experience, as have I. And, there are so many people in their 20s and in their teens who are such deeply good, hungry, curious individuals. And being around them is an absolute gift. And the energy and the enthusiasm for life, it just makes you feel more alive. Any thoughts that you would like to share?
I would love to share thoughts. They inspire me.
Mm-hmm.
They inspire me because, they are so hungry, and they, give me that inspiration because I know that that's our next workforce. It's the next leaders in our world. And so I see that and I learn from them. They have a different perspective. They have fresh new ideas. And sometimes I just wonder, is when I say fresh is because they haven't been really some of them haven't been in the workforce quite yet. So it's like the ideas are so fresh, so not impacted or influenced or, they're new, they're bright. So I find them very inspiring.
So good. All right, let's talk
I'd
about. Oh,
absolutely.
did you want to add something, Jordan?
Oh yeah, no, I'd absolutely second that. And as far as the coach approach with a younger person too, it almost amps up the curiosity even more as a coach,
Mm,
right? Of, these people haven't had life experiences as a leader in an organization, leading other people, right? And so I've found that, outside of being inspired by them and just so hopeful for the future, to be honest, that it helps me continue to improve as a coach as well, and just have such a wider lens of the experience, across generations. So
yeah,
it's great.
yeah,
It's an awesome
yeah.
opportunity.
It's a gift. All right, so let's talk briefly about certification. I would love, so all three of you have gone through the Smart Growth certification, and I would love for you just to reflect on the process or something that you learned in going through certification, besides the fact that we make you work really hard to do it, that a lesson that you are carrying with you now and that you want to remember. And Sarah, let's start with you.
I think the lesson for me was there's just such accessibility, I think, in the smart growth coaching model,
Mm,
where, you come together as a cohort and you come together with such a broad range of experiences and backgrounds, things that you have, done in your life. And it's like the S-curve door is just wide open in the way that you think about the concept and the way that you think about growth. And so there's both the experience of being in the certification, in the in-person space, but then there's also that way that you take the concepts and you apply them in coaching conversations, and you experience that same thing where I don't have anyone who said, I don't know, I don't really feel like this applies to me. It's so universal and
mhm,
it's so inclusive. And I think that's one of the things that I both experienced as a student of the
mhm,
smart growth work, and one of the things that I feel like I'm able to bring to the people I'm coaching.
mhm. Mm. That is so simple, right? It's like you can
Yeah.
go really deep, but it's also very simple that you can literally explain it to a 10-year-old and they'll be like, oh, yeah, I get it. I got it. Okay.
Yeah,
So that's what you're going to take away is the applicability across demographics.
absolutely.
Okay. Mm. Jordan, what about you? What's a takeaway that you have?
Yeah, plenty. And just to appreciate the process of it,
Mhm,
right? And it's one thing to understand something conceptually, and it's a whole other to see yourself in it
mm,
and on it and experience it. So, what I'm taking away, one of the things that has continued to stick with me is remembering that every single one of us is on a growth curve, right? So if maybe I'm not seeing eye to eye with someone, for example, it it opens up that door of, maybe we're in different places, right? Or
mm,
maybe we're thinking about this a little bit differently. And to apply that in a way that, as you just said, a 10-year-old could understand, it creates so much space to have productive conversations
mhm.
and just to really get to where you are,
Yeah.
right? And like really just understand it at a conceptual level. And again, just seeing yourself in it. So I look forward to continuing to integrate it into, the practice
Mhm.
and even think about my own growth curve. So
Oh, yeah.
it's mutually beneficial for sure.
Yeah. 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 Okay, let's hear from you, Rebecca, and then I'll share a quick story. So what about you?
This is a great transition from what Jordan is saying is you experience the growth tool
Mhm,
going through it.
mm,
Okay. So I love that you can walk into any course and we all have this fixation of whatever it is. And we got these years of experience. Again, we're not those fresh students any
mhm,
longer.
mhm,
And we go in and we have our own, ways of doing. I think that, for me, I walked in with humility and I said, I am open. I want to just learn this. And what I found myself is I was really in the beginning at launch, at the beginning of that S curve, learning everything. So
Mm.
what I say going through this certification, and anyone who might be thinking about it, is you actually experience it. So
Mm.
it makes you a better coach because you can relate to where others are in their growth. So it's a very relatable and excellent experience. And boy, did I learn some things about myself as well. I learned to just give yourself permission and grace to
Yeah.
be somewhere where you're not sure about
Right.
and open your mind and start with a beginner's mind.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. Like what you said is that the certification itself is an S curve. You're at the launch point, and then you get into mastery, and this idea of talking yourself through. So just this past weekend, I had this interesting experience of I was invited to speak to a group of executive MBA students about the S curve, et cetera. But the price of doing that was the very next morning to go rappelling with those MBA students in Moab, Utah, off of cliffs of 100 feet, which I have never done before. So you can bet I was doing a lot of, I am on the launch point of this S curve. And I was
Yes.
using it. I mean, and people kept saying to me, so how do you feel? Are you on the launch point? But it was perfect, right? Because it gave me a way to talk myself through it. It gave all of us a language to have that conversation about doing something new that was both thrilling and terrifying. All right, so I'm going to ask you, I'm going to open this up. Some of you might have an idea, some of you may not, and that's okay. Anyone have a specific case study of how you have now used this framework or this tool with a client?
Yeah, I can jump in.
Okay.
One of my clients who I'd been working with for a while, so we've been coaching for quite some time. I asked her if she'd be open because we were talking a lot about where she's at in her career, what's next for her. There were just all these questions that were circling around our coaching conversations, and I asked her if she'd be open to integrating this tool and trying this out. And long story short, she said yes. And the richness of our discussion that happened after she took it was profound, as far as being able to really locate where she's at in her S curve when it comes to her career,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
being able to apply some of the emotional parts that go along with that was just so cathartic
Mhm.
and clarifying for her. And I hope it's okay that I'm saying this. Obviously, she's not here with us, but it ended up leading to her making a change in her career
Mhm.
because she had that clarity. And I've never seen her more happy, and I've
Mhm.
never seen
That's so
her
good.
more proud of this decision. And that's what I think it helps it do too. Is there's so many decisions in life we're trying to make, but if we can have a tool that can help us really get clear on where we are and what's next for us, and be intentional about that, this tool really helped
Yeah.
guide that conversation for sure.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? One of the things it does is it gives you this permission to be where you are. It gives you permission to
Mhm.
say, I think I'm done here and it's time for me to do something new. And it gives you permission to say, this is really fun. I'm doing really well right now. And it gives you permission to
Yeah.
say, I'm doing something new and I feel really uncomfortable. And so you get that permission slip. It's a great case study. Sarah, Rebecca, do you have anything you want to add before I proceed?
I think, as you were sharing that story, Jordan, I was thinking about the conversations that I've had over the past few months with people we all have all of these S curves in our lives, right? Many of us have a work S curve. Some people have a parenting S curve. Some people they've just learned to play tennis S curve. And so just reflecting on the various ways that you can engage with clients in these coaching conversations, and acknowledging what does it look like when you're at the launch of one and a sweet spot at another and mastery at another, or what if it's all launch points, and just the nuances, I think, of the many different curves in our lives that are sort of always at play. and the richness of those conversations where we get to bring in the how does it feel, and as you sort of take into account all the S curves, like what's that overall human experience. So that's just something I was reflecting on, thinking about the journeys with clients, and that we're all on with our various S curves.
Yeah, and you just reminded me too, Sarah, of it really does allow you to navigate that emotional terrain, right? Like, what does it feel like? And I think that it gives you that way to, I'm a big proponent of the feelings wheel, because if we know how we feel, then we're going to be able to move through something differently. And it gives you a language to talk about how you're feeling, whether, again, you're doing something new or you're sort of timed out on something. Rebecca, any thoughts that you would like to add?
That's what the coaching piece, that's where coaching is really, really prevalent in any sort of real client coach relationship, is that it does allow that space for the feeling. It's the safe space. And so I even had a client where I did the 1 hour debrief with the S curve tool, and they realized they have a new S curve of taking 5 weeks off for their own health and wellness.
Wow.
And it was a really hard thing after being in the work world for 30 plus years. And they said, I have to take off 5 weeks. This is they themselves called it out and said, this is going to be a whole new S curve. Oh my, this is going to feel really daunting. Like, I don't even know where to begin. And so it drove a really beautiful conversation around that. And that there was like a beautiful coaching conversation that led to what's in there for them. And what does it feel like? So feeling, yes. And that's where I feel our world is heading in a strange place with all the technology and the AI, which is a whole nother probably podcast. But feel the feelings and well-being. We need this more in our world. I think. I think we need to connect more and talk about it and be okay and have that safe space to talk about it. So coaching does that.
Yeah, I love that. And the idea of AI. We actually had a fellow by the name of Paul Allen on the podcast recently when we were talking about AI. And as with any advancement, there's the stuff that there's the downside and there's the upside. And I think in general, my perspective, and I'm sure you're not going to be surprised to hear this, is I think if we can harness it, it can help us 10x our growth. And it's super exciting. So, okay, just a couple final questions for each of you. Let's start with you, Jordan, but I'm going to ask all three of you this question, which is, for someone who wants to be more effective in coaching people around them. So this goes a little bit to Michael Bungay Stanier's work of the coaching habit, but just someone who wants to be a more effective coach, whether you're a manager or you're an actual coach, what's one piece of advice that you would give to that person? And Jordan, we'll start with you.
Wow. I know we talk about this a lot in the coaching world, but it's something I'm really passionate about and continue to speak to is, coach to the who of the person, right? And really just recognize that we are all one of one. Like there's only one Whitney, there's only one Rebecca, there's only one Sarah, and we all have our own unique experiences, right? So the more we can get in touch with the who of the client, that leads to powerful coaching, that leads to powerful connection in that space, that leads to powerful change and helping people feel supported and that they're enough to do it. To Rebecca's point, I mean, that connection is something that has a huge positive impact, and that I'm extremely passionate about.
So Jordan, when you said that, the two thoughts that came to my mind and my heart were like, you got to be able to almost grab onto them and see who they are, and you can't coach someone if you don't care enough about them to be direct, and you can only be effective as a coach if there is some piece of you that deeply loves them as a human being. And I love that coach to the who. I've never heard that before. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So good. All right, Rebecca, let's go to you, and then we'll go to you, Sarah.
I'm going to bring a golden thread through from what we began is a coach needs to get coached. So,
Mm,
you know, you need to always constantly get coached in order to be a good coach to your others, to others.
yeah.
And then the servant and humility. And I also work off of the God grounded confidence that I bring,
Mm,
to be direct. It's of service to my client. So I take an approach where it's full of faith and also just the servant leadership, humility, and I feel that it would be a disservice to anyone, to myself, to any client, if I didn't experience coaching for myself,
yeah.
then I wouldn't be a real coach. So
Yeah, for
I'm going to
sure.
stick with that.
Yeah, Rebecca, I love that too. I remember someone saying to me, my therapist at the time saying to me, every therapist has to be in therapy. And I think the same is true. Every coach needs to be coached, so that we're walking our talk. And I think that's really basically then what that means, Rebecca, is that every single person on this planet needs to have a coach, because every single person on the
Yes.
planet is coaching other people in some form or
That's right.
fashion. Way to talk our own book, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
agreed.
Sarah, what about you?
My sort of one piece of advice would be cultivate a practice of deep listening. I
Mm,
think listening is we all know when we feel heard, and we know when someone is being a generous listener. And I think it's a concept that feels like it should be easy, but I think because we have so much input in our lives, we are thinking about so many different things, that just being present, just really deeply listening is such a gift. And I'm looking at you, Jordan White, because you are one of the best listeners I have ever encountered in my life.
aw.
And it really is such a gift. And I think it's a gift we can all offer one another. And the experience of both listening deeply and knowing that you've been listened to is really powerful.
Yeah. Mm. And a
Yeah.
great place to
That
practice is with our children. Go ahead,
Mhm.
Rebecca. What were you going to
It
say?
is. That listening piece is in line with where leaders actually they falter at, is because there's that pride and fear that comes
Mhm.
into the picture,
Mhm.
and so they lack that active
Yeah.
listening.
Yeah.
So I love what you're saying, Sarah, is that listening is really just such a big important factor for really anyone
Mhm.
in our world, from family to friends to community to work,
Yeah. Mm, so good. Okay. So generous listener. Every coach needs a coach, and coach to the who. I feel like that's a cheer. Coach to the who. All right. So last question for each one of you. And if you've listened to my podcast, Jordan, it sounds like you have, then you will know what I am about to ask. And that is, what has been useful to you in this conversation? Does anybody want to go first? Oh, and I'll preface it by saying this. It does not need to be anything that anybody said. It can be a thought that you had, an aha that you had. So your useful could be, what did you hear that wasn't being said?
I'll throw my piece in here is how much when I get together with coaches and leaders in our world, so much care is in
Mm,
the space. The
mm,
energy in the space is care, and how much we want to help others. There's a lot of that in the coaching community. So for anyone who's thinking about getting a coach, go get a coach,
yeah.
because we genuinely care.
Yeah. And you know what I love about that? I- What I thought you were going to say, and I think you were saying it, is that there was a sense of care in this conversation. Yeah.
Absolutely. Everything is about helping our
Yeah.
clients. It's of service, right?
Yeah.
So, but we do really deep down in its heart, from our hearts, we really want to help our clients and create a great relationship with them
Mm,
and help them grow.
so good. Jordan, what's been useful for you in this conversation?
Yeah, Rebecca inspired me, and I'm just thinking about the power of community.
Mm,
And, even seeing Sarah's face, here just it brings me back to the certification and, just the rich discussions. And to Rebecca's point, like just the tremendous amount of care that we have for people as coaches, and just the power of community, though, because as a someone who's more on the introverted side of things, I tend to do a lot of work by myself, and the more I do stuff like this, and the more I'm out having conversations about things that I'm really passionate about, that only helps elevate, I think, the awareness that I gain as a coach, and more specifically, it just continues to make additions to the community of helping people develop and grow. So that's what's on my mind today, is
Community.
we
So good.
have this conversation.
All right, Sarah, what's been useful for you?
Yeah, for me, it's just continued opportunities to learn. And I'm always so grateful to be in the presence of people who are intentional in their work, and reflective, and open to growth. And so, I find even when I'm in situations where it's not necessarily like there's something new coming to me, it's like the different ways that some of these concepts get framed. And I think hearing different perspectives on the way that coaches see the work, the value of the work. Whitney, you said it's about loving the people you coach, and that so deeply resonated. And so it's just these opportunities to get to learn from coaches who are on your own journeys. And then there's sort of like this big collective coaching journey that we're on together.
Yeah. So good. All right. So we're at the top of our S curve in this conversation that we're having. I'm going to ask you and invite you to share one word that's coming to mind. And let's do a feeling, because we talked a lot about, you want to stop trying to feel better and get better at feeling. I'm going to do you first, Rebecca, then I'm going to go to Sarah, and then Jordan. And you can take a second because we can edit out the pause. But just what's one word to encapsulate what you're feeling right now?
Gratitude. Full of gratitude.
Sarah?
Inspired.
Jordan?
Optimistic.
Happy is my word. Thank you. Thank you for being with us and having this conversation. I feel happy and uplifted and in a different place now than I was when we started an hour ago. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us, Whitney.
Yeah.